How has the landscape of crime changed in this country, the sorts of cases you would see before you? Have we always had as much knife crime as we seem to have now? Has that grown in recent years? What is the situation?
I don't know the statistics, but I do know my experience. So I would have begun going to the Old Bailey as a barrister when I first came to the bar, as a baby barrister, if I was lucky enough to be briefed as junior counsel sitting behind a QC in a big case. And if you walked along the corridors of the Old Bailey, where there are 18 courts, you would have seen a few murders, quite a few murders, but there'd have been court after court with armed robberies, with rapes, with cases of a non-fatal nature. You don't see that so much at the Old Bailey anymore. Frankly, you barely see it at all. Nearly every courtroom for years now will have been occupied with murders or a bit of terrorism. There are other things, but essentially that's what goes on there. Not necessarily murders. Let me replace that with the word homicides, because there are different ways of killing people. But that's what we do. And even the lowest level homicides, even, and I don't want to downplay the gravity of them, but even something as, how do I put it without making it sound as if it is less serious, even something like death by careless driving, you've got a death there. That's what we do there. But most of the courtrooms will be dealing with death using weapons, and most of the weapons will be knives, and most of the defendants will be 25 or under. And once I say that, you will see immediately what's been happening in our society. The rise of gangs, the links between gangs and drugs, gangs and violence, intergang violence. So there has been, to my mind and in my experience, a sea change. Now, I know that people will produce statistics that throw different angles on that, but I think it is clear there has been a change over the last 45 years since I became a barrister.
And when did you start noticing this change, Wendy? When did the change start occurring for you?
I have certainly seen it since I've been a judge in 2007, but I think you could probably go back a decade before that to begin to see it. The roots must have been there before that. They must have been, because these things don't drop down out of a clear blue sky. But the carrying of knives has become, I hesitate to use the word, but I will, endemic in some parts of our society. And it is not limited to those who belong to gangs. But if those who belong to gangs are carrying knives and creating a violent situation for others to be living in, then the risk of the others carrying knives in response is enormously increased.
And when you saw these people who were carrying knives and were accused of murder, were there commonalities between them? Did they share certain characteristics? We've already mentioned the age thing, 25 and under. What type of people were they?
I don't want to sound like a bleeding heart, but I guess people that we as a society didn't sort out, look after, care enough about, recognise their problems. There are bad people. There's no two ways about it. There are wicked people. But if you asked me how many times I've seen someone who, in my judgment, was truly wicked. Not what they did was wicked, but that they themselves were wicked. In the dock, I could count them over nearly half a century on the fingers of my hands. If you ask me how many people have done really wicked things, the answer is I've seen thousands. So the question that maybe we should be asking ourselves is why people who are not essentially bad do bad things, and why they're doing it at the age of 16, 17, 19, 21.
And they are certainly, based on your experience, they were not doing it as much 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. So what do you think it is that's causing this increase?
We have become, this may be entirely wrong, but my sense is we've become very short-termist. At least we've allowed our children to grow up with a sense of being very short-termist. Now, if I put that in the starkest terms, you don't see many gang members in their 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s. And you laugh because it is self-evident that you don't. But what that means is when youngsters devote themselves to that way of life, they're not looking into a future. They're not looking into a long-term future. A lot of them die. A lot of them are seriously harmed. A lot of them die from injuries. A lot of them die from other things associated with the lifestyle, particularly if they become addicted to drugs. A lot of them end up with seriously miserable lives in their mid-30s. Once you're part of a gang, it's very difficult to extricate yourself and lead a different sort of life. Once you've been to prison and have a criminal record, put that the other way around, once you've got a criminal record, whether or not you've been to prison, it's extraordinarily difficult to work your way back into society again. And so we've got a whole bunch of youngsters who are not, as school kids, saying, where am I going with my life? How am I going to have a family, have a career? They're doing something quite different. And if you see the sorts of backgrounds and lives that they're living, it's not that surprising.